A UFO sighting over multiple cities.
I don't know what the hell it is.
An extraterrestrial event that changed the course of history. And an alien abduction witnessed by no less than 6 people. On Ancient Aliens, we've investigated dozens of extraordinary encounters from among the thousands that have been reported. Here is what I consider to be the most compelling stories. Each one adds to the growing body of proof that we have been visited by extraterrestrials for thousands of years.
The Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, Arizona. November 5th, 1975. 22-year-old forestry worker Travis Walton is driving home after sundown along with 6 co-workers when suddenly a strange light appears in the sky.
We just finished a long, hard day and it was starting to get dark. So we loaded up our equipment, we're headed home. And I noticed some little glimmers of light coming through the trees. And the light seemed to be coming from higher than where ground level would be. It was only when we got to where this light was crossing the road that we had an unobstructed view of the craft. Alan Dallas in the back yelled out, "It's a flying saucer!" And I said, "Mike, stop!" It was a clearly visible, clearly defined metallic object, a disc hovering there, outlined against the sky. I threw open the door, thinking I'd get a closer look before it took off. As I got closer to it, the sound it was making, it was a sound you both heard and felt. And the crew said they could feel the vibration in the truck. They said it seemed like something was about to happen. And it was. That's when this energy hit me. The crew said that it was like I'd stepped on a landmine, like an explosion so violent that they thought it had killed me. When this beam of energy hit me, I felt like a physical blow, but with a sort of a tingling, sort of an electric shock sort of feeling at the same time. I don't know whether I came to soon after I was taken aboard, but I knew I was on some kind of an elevated gurney or operating table. I was looking straight into the face of this creature, and I just flipped out.
He saw these hideous entities that scared him. Maybe quite similar to the modern idea of the so-called alien greys. And he fought, and he panicked. And then these aliens seemed to go away, and then their place was taken by much more human-like aliens, and he calmed down.
In the case of these human-looking ones, I started to have serious misgivings that this was a rescue. And that's when they put this mask over my face, and I just blacked out real quickly.
Now, the suspicion here was that actually these weren't different aliens. These were the same aliens, but they were capable of shape-shifting into something else, specifically to calm him down.
Crews searched everywhere for the missing forest worker. But it wasn't until 5 days later that Walton reappeared in a nearby town.
I was lying face down outside in the dark, and there was a light above me. And I saw the bottom of the craft there right before it shot up into the sky.
When details of Travis Walton's close encounter were revealed to authorities, they dismissed his account as a possible hallucination. But Travis has no doubt that what he and his co-workers experienced was a genuine extraterrestrial encounter.
What no one asked was, what about the rest of the crew? How do 7 people have an identical hallucination? And besides that, they were given lie detector tests by state police, which they passed. There's real-life things that occur out there that need to be understood. So take a look at the facts and then judge. I don't know the purpose that they had. All I know is what happened to me. This was unmistakable.
Northeast Syria, the Kabur River. According to the Hebrew Bible, it was here in the 6th century BC that divine beings descended from heaven and made contact with a Hebrew priest named Ezekiel.
Ezekiel was by the river Chebar, and he said a great whirlwind came toward him. He described it as a fire enfolding itself, and out of the fire was the color of amber, which is the Hebrew word, which means polished spectrum metal, which implies that it's metallic and that it's spinning. And it lands in front of him, and suddenly, out of this whirlwind come 4 creatures.
In the Bible, the prophet Ezekiel calls these spiritual beings cherubims and describes them as having 4 faces, 4 wings, and skin that shone like polished bronze.
Ezekiel says that he was taken up into the sky and taken to different places where he could see different things. And then he was told some of the future things that were going to come. This was a huge image of hope that came to Ezekiel during his experience.
But is this the story of a divine encounter? Or could Ezekiel's description of metallic wheels descending from the sky in a whirlwind of fire and strange beings with skin like polished bronze point to a different type of otherworldly contact?
He's got the best description of a UFO that's anywhere in the Bible, because he basically says that the thing looked like a wheel within a wheel, kind of a classic flying saucer description.
Ezekiel describes that the outside of the wheel doesn't spin. The inside of the wheel spins. So he's telling us that's the engines. None of this necessarily has to be magic. This could all be technology.
It is basically the account of a guy who's been abducted, who has been told certain things, and who's then returned to the place of origin. It would be what we today would describe as an abduction account.
Could it be that the prophet Ezekiel's account of a heavenly close encounter might have been something else? Perhaps one not involving heavenly beings, but visitors of another interplanetary nature. This concept was put forth to the public by the ancient astronaut theory pioneer Erich von Däniken in his 1968 book, Chariots of the Gods. And after hearing Erich speak at a conference in the early 1970s, NASA engineer Joseph Blumrich was determined to debunk his controversial interpretation.
I had a speech at NASA in Huntsville, and I spoke about Ezekiel. And the chief engineer of that time, Mr. Joe Blumrich, came to me and said, "Eddie, that was very interesting, but in the Bible, you will definitely not find any technology." But he still said, "I will read originally in the Bible Ezekiel."
Blumrich set out to find flaws in von Däniken's theory. But when he read the book of Ezekiel, he was shocked to find himself agreeing with the controversial author. So much so, in fact, that he wrote a book called The Spaceships of Ezekiel, in which he provided a blueprint for a practical landing module based on the description found in the biblical story. Several years later, a German structural engineer named Hans Herbert Bayer also sketched out a blueprint of the second section of the book of Ezekiel, where Ezekiel is told to construct an open-topped building to house the flying chariot.
Hans Herbert Bayer sent the blueprint to Erich von Däniken. Within 5 minutes of looking at these blueprints, Erich was on the phone with Joe Blumrich. And he said, "Hey, Joe, can you bring a model of your spaceship of Ezekiel?" And then he called Hans Herbert Bayer and he said, "Can you bring a model of your construction of Ezekiel's temple?" Both models were created to the same ratio. And guess what? Ezekiel's spaceship fit into the temple construction that Hans Herbert Bayer recreated according to the biblical measurements.
As far as ancient astronaut theorists are concerned, the biblical account of Ezekiel provides conclusive evidence of an alien encounter. But more importantly, it may also reveal that for thousands of years, the destiny of humankind has been directed by extraterrestrials. Khirbet, Qumran, Palestine. In 1946, a collection of ancient manuscripts known as the Dead Sea Scrolls is discovered hidden in clay jars deep inside a cave. Among the manuscripts is the Book of Enoch, a so-called lost biblical text. In the Bible's Old Testament, Enoch is the seventh of 10 patriarchs who lived before the Great Flood and the great-grandfather of Noah. But where the Hebrew Bible only mentions Enoch briefly, the Book of Enoch, which consists of more than 100 chapters, greatly expands on his story. In it is a curious passage that details Enoch's ascent to heaven.
According to the book of Enoch, he says he was 12 years old. The whole community of his village wanted to sleep, but then they hear the noise in the sky. Two angels came down from the sky. One of the two beings said to Enoch, "Don't be afraid, human." Then they went up to the so-called heaven.
And in the book of Enoch, we learn Enoch himself is taken into the heavens in a fiery chariot.
Enoch goes up to the so-called sky, and there Enoch sees something over the earth which he cannot describe. He has no word like spaceship or something. He says it looked like houses of crystal.
It is described that he sees planet Earth underneath him. He actually describes his arrival, how he has to walk through these different rooms where he sees jewels and he sees shiny surfaces and blinking lights. It is an eyewitness account. It's I, Enoch, did this. I, Enoch, saw that. The Book of Enoch is one of the first abduction accounts written down by a fellow human being.
Does the Book of Enoch really describe an actual abduction event? One that took place thousands of years ago? And if so, might this incredible close encounter be documenting communication with otherworldly beings?
Enoch, he was said to be at the right hand of God. In fact, Enoch was said to be God's scribe in later tradition. So God would decree things, and Enoch was the one who recorded everything that went on. So Enoch was the keeper of all knowledge of heaven.
This is one of the reasons why the book of Enoch is so controversial. Enoch was the first human to ascend to the throne of God, where he is given powerful universal knowledge by angelic beings or extraterrestrial beings.
If Enoch was given information from extraterrestrial beings to share with mankind, as ancient astronaut theorists contend, what truths about our otherworldly past might be waiting to be revealed?
The extraterrestrials want that in a far future of mankind, we start to see these things. We start to translate these books. And now we start to ask questions. We start to ask, for example, how can we explain that? Have we maybe been visited by extraterrestrials? And I think it's important to think in this way, because these extraterrestrials have promised to return. And one day they will return.
I was taught not to believe in coincidence. I was taught to look for patterns. When you have all these encounters, these sightings, these descriptions we have from biblical times onwards, it tells you there's something going on. Doesn't necessarily tell you what it is, but it tells you there's something there.